I survived my 2 weeks away, including a week in the United States. I survived, folks. That's right. No problems at all at the border. No problems at all with customs. No problem at all with anybody, actually. It was kind of business as usual in the United States, except for the fact that, of course, that I got married, which is great. And had a lovely wedding at the Flamingo, of course, with my new bride, Kelly, who's now Kelly Veinotte. And a funny little anecdote. I'm gonna talk about Kelly for a minute here. She's an extremely bright person. Why she's with me, I don't know, but she's extremely bright and beautiful and all that. However, when she changed her name on social media, on LinkedIn, she spelt her name correct, Veinotte. And on Instagram, she spelled it correct. But on Facebook, she spelled it wrong, Vienotte. She said, look, I changed my name on social media. I'm not on Facebook anymore, but I looked at her Facebook page and I said, well, that's great. It looks great, but you spelled V-I-E. It's wrong. And it turns out that it takes 6 months from name change. You can't change your name for 6 months. So I just thought I'd share that little anecdote, a little story with Kelly. But listen, we had a great time and a wonderful wedding, and it was a great experience. And I will say this about Las Vegas: 3-4 days is enough. 7 days is too much. We did some other things. I've been there before. I've been in that area, but it's just growing so rapidly, and there's so much going on. I'm not dissuading anybody from going there, but if you're going to go to Vegas, especially if you're never been there before, don't book a week. Go 3-4 days, and that's about it. And that's my advice. Anyway, thanks to Dan Alstrand for sitting in and doing a fine job, of course, and thanks to Vanessa Vandeness on the other side of the glass at the control boards. Doing a fine job, as always. Lots and lots to get to today, and we'll talk to our councillors in just a moment or two, and we'll take your calls, municipal related, of course. Mayor Andy Fillmore will deliver his first State of the Municipality address to a business audience in downtown Halifax later on today, so that's something that we can talk about. What are your thoughts on the state of the municipality? Are we heading in the right direction? What are some challenges? A new study shows Haligonians are still welcoming to American tourists despite political tensions between the two countries, and this is something that I can throw out there for you as well. Will you be welcoming to American tourists? Has your attitude towards Americans changed? I can't imagine anybody snubbing or being unwelcoming to people visiting the region just because they're Americans. I certainly would not. I wouldn't think that would be the case for most of us. But perhaps for some of you that would be the case. Of course, we've got the federal election ongoing. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is promising to tighten financial transparency rules for elected officials and is using that promise to take aim at Liberal leader Mark Carney. So doing his best to make waves concerning Mark Carney and his holdings. And look, it's legitimate. These are legitimate questions. And not paying taxes and offshore tax havens and on all of that. These are legitimate points. But my question is, do you think that for the most part, people care? And some care, but I'm saying to the point where enough people care to make a difference. And I don't know that it really does. Whether that's right or wrong, it's just a question that I'll throw out there. Do you care about Mark Carney and his holdings and taxes that weren't paid in this country and tax havens that he has used and utilized? Does that matter to you? And also, Canadian municipal leaders are calling on the major federal party leaders to act to reduce climate-related emergencies and move away from building more pipelines. An open letter signed by 128 mayors, councillors, and deputy mayors and other city officials asked the conversation during the federal election campaign to move toward climate action, asking the leaders to fight back with more investments in national projects to protect Canadians from looming tariffs and climate change. So what are your thoughts on this? Do you agree with this? Do you think that in a rush to diversify our markets and to bolster and to strengthen our economy, that it will be too quick to move towards a traditional fossil fuel projects like pipelines and mining projects? Do you think that there may be too much haste here? Or do you agree with the direction and feel that it's long overdue that, in fact, we utilize these resources? And now is the time to, in fact, lengthen our stride and be more strident when it comes to these types of projects. Something else that you can talk about. So lots and lots to get to. Again, thanks so much for tuning in and listening. By the way, Rory McIlroy, congratulations to him on his first green jacket yesterday. That was a stunning victory and well-deserved. Not that Rory McIlroy's listening to this right now, but for all Rory fans, long overdue and generally just a gamer. And he has won now the Grand Slam. He's won all 4 majors. And well-deserved. And Corey Connors, of course, Canadian, finished 8th. Not bad at all, really. And just a young guy and some promise there for him moving forward. All right, let's dive right into it. It's Councillors on the Hot Seat. It is a Monday. It's time to talk municipal politics. Joining us on the phone, a couple of councillors, Sam Austin, District 5, Dartmouth Centre. Sam, hello. Thanks for doing it today.
No problem, Todd, and congratulations on your nuptials.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it very much. And Jean St. Amand, District 16, Bedford, Wentworth, joins us. Jean, hello.
Hi, Todd. How you doing?
I'm well. Yourself?
Good.
Excellent. All right, Jean, let's start with you. Anything that you want to pass along to your constituents or the listeners before we get into this?
I've heard from quite a number of residents about the unique challenges that Bedford is facing as far as congestion is concerned and potholes and a variety of other issues. So, rest assured, HRM staff is on it, and I really appreciate residents reaching out to me to bring my attention to anything that they want to have the city be aware of.
Yeah, potholes, though, I mean, this is something that is, look, you're always going to have it, but do you think that the city's doing enough?
It's really difficult to gauge. I mean, they consistently go out and try to do patches over the course of even the colder winter months, just for the purposes of driver safety. And so it winds up meaning that we wind up having to go back and fix the same spot potentially more than once we get into the season where the asphalt can actually be laid down and stay permanently. So it's challenging. I mean, every time that they wind up getting that information from residents, they have to tier and prioritize and get out. And I know that it's not nearly fast enough for everyone's concerns, but the reality is it's a triaging effort that winds up having to be done pretty diligently over the course of the entire season. It's never just send someone out, fix it once, and walk away. There are always issues, especially with the weather that we experience.
Right, for sure. Sam Austin, how about you? Anything that you've got cooking in your area that you'd like to pass along?
Yeah, sure. I would just encourage residents to, it's actually a District 5 and District 3 thing. There was an open house just 2 weeks ago, I think it was, regarding the Shearwater to Woodside Ferry Terminal active transportation plan. This is a major project on the Dartmouth side that would, when complete, you'd be able to be off-road, walking, or biking all the way from basically Waverley down through the chains of lakes, so down along the Harbour Trail, and then all the way out to Lawrencetown. So it's the last missing piece to stitch those two big chunks of off-road recreational trail that we have together. So I'd encourage people to check out Shape Your City because there's details up on the plan.
Fair enough. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us if you'd like to chat with the councillors, one or both. 902-405-6000. State of the municipality address being delivered today by the mayor. Sam, any broad strokes thoughts on this, or what anything to add to this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know what the mayor's going to say. It'll be his first outing at Shape Your City. So, my own kind of inclination, we've just been through a very demanding budget process, and it laid bare some of the challenges the city has regarding finances and also growth. I mean, the two of them are kind of, I think, probably our number one and number two right now, those issues.
Jean, how about you? What are your thoughts on what we might expect from the mayor?
Well, I think what Sam just said is probably pretty fair. I would imagine that the mayor is going to speak not only to the process that we just went through, but the process that he envisions going forward. I mean, we did just pass a motion that will do a little bit more of a deep dive into how the finances within the city work in an effort to try to find every opportunity to ensure that residents get their money's worth. And so that effort is pretty important because we wound up having to dip effectively into savings in order to keep the tax rate flat, and we are still growing as a city. So there are some pretty unique challenges that we'll face on an ongoing basis in the budget, and so we've got to be able to find ways to spend really efficiently.
Okay, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for our counselors on the hot seat. Again, 902-405-6000. So when it comes to the state of the municipality, I don't know if we could affix an adjective towards it or a description towards it, but are we moving in the right direction, or are we stagnant? How might you describe, Sam? I'll ask you if you were delivering this, what would be some of the things you'd include in this address?
Well, I mean, that's a tough one. I hadn't really thought about me giving it before. I mean, if I kind of think about, like, are we going in the right direction? Are we not? I think we generally are on most things. The big tension that I kind of see over the years of my time at City Hall is the pace of getting there, right? That is the biggest challenge, right? I think when you look at things like transportation, we have got good transit plans, we've got good AT plans. We've got money problems and resource issues on delivering. And so oftentimes what I see, it's not an issue of, the right direction, wrong direction. It's right direction, but not enough resources to get there in the timeline that people want us to.
Okay, Jean, how about you? What would you disseminate if you were in the chair today?
Well, I think it's balancing priorities and opportunities. As Sam pointed out, there's lots of things that we want to be able to do, but we don't necessarily have the resources to do them all. So we wind up having to prioritize what we're going to deliver, and a lot of that has to do with feedback that we're hearing from residents.
Okay, what is some of that feedback that you consistently hear?
Well, I mean, certainly in my area in particular, we're seeing infrastructure kind of overwhelmed by the growth that we wind up with in West Bedford in particular. So the thought process is, well, we need to try to tap the brakes a little bit, figure out the planning so that we can ensure that the infrastructure is in place before it's needed rather than after. And that's something that I think wound up happening as a result of the explosive growth that we experienced coming out of COVID in particular, and things got a little bit ahead of where we intended for them to be. And so now it's gradually righting the ship by prioritizing things like transit, things like active transportation, all of the things that wind up being able to get people around without necessarily forcing them into a car.
Are you surprised that you consistently, I suppose it will always be the case, or likely, of the pushback when it comes to active transportation and bike lanes, Jean, that this continues to be a bone of contention for some? Is that surprising to you or no?
Not particularly, but I think it has everything to do with a bit of a culture shift that we're a little overdue in seeing happen. You go to some other municipalities, and the idea of taking active transport and taking public transit is just second nature. It's just what people automatically think of. Moving to a private vehicle is the backup plan rather than the primary way to get around. And that's just something that takes a little while to become part of your culture. And a lot of it has to do with the accessibility and affordability and reliability of those services in other municipalities. And we're making strides to make that more possible here in Halifax. It just takes a little bit of time. And, as Sam pointed out, it takes resources as well.
Okay, fair enough. 902-405-6000. Sam, you've been a strong proponent and are a strong proponent, of course, of climate action and Halifax and the 3% that goes towards that. This is something that some people have concerns with. Not everybody, of course, but some have concerns with. Do you hear from some constituents who feel as though that 3% should be perhaps scaled back or even eliminated? And if so, what's your response to them?
Occasionally. I mean, I'm in the business of never being able to please everybody all the time. And so, the approach I've always taken in politics is just to be clear about the positions I have and why. And so, when I get an email, and it's usually, it's not often that I get one from somebody that would say, like, I believe in climate change, but I can't afford this. Mostly the emails on this topic I get are from folks who just deny the reality that we face. And, it's kind of there's whole academic papers and psychology stuff that's kind of looked at the, kind of climate change issue from that perspective. And that's a hard one. You're not, an email from me is not going to change someone's mind on that point when they're already rejecting the scientific consensus of, basically the entire world. It's an issue that I think it's like, well, what's your role as a politician? Sometimes it's to reflect the people you represent wholeheartedly as much as you can. Sometimes it's to try and go back to people and provide leadership and explain why something's important and why we need to get on with it. And so the climate change one has been one that I've always been firmly on that side of things, of trying to point out the impending realities that we all face and the need for action on this issue.
Okay, so if somebody opposes it or perhaps believes that 3% might not be the right amount, or that perhaps we could pause it to deal with other issues, does that automatically make them a denier?
No, but it's a very small group that actually fits that. Like I said, most contact I've had on this issue has been from people who just deny the basic reality of it. And, it's a small but, very passionate and vocal minority out there that's still in that position in 2025, that climate change isn't real, but they do exist. And so that's most of the communication. I mean, I think there's a nuanced position and a discussion that can be had about it, but generally that's not what comes to me.
Okay, fair enough. 902-405-6000. Give us a call, folks. Give us one open line for you. If you'd like to chat with one or both the councillors, Jean St. Amand, Sam Austin, 902-405-6000. Councillors on the Hot Seat continues when we come back. All right, we've got our councillors on the hot seat. Jean St. Amand, District 16, Bedford Wentworth, and Sam Austin, District 5, Dartmouth Centre. Get some open lines for you as well. Give us a call if you'd like to chat with the councillors, if you've got a question for the councillors. 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. So when it comes to the budget, the $1 billion+ budget, Sam, moving forward, how do we kind of maintain growth or deal with this budget so that look, the ends, or rather the needs are endless, right? So how do we make sure that we keep this within the envelope that befits this city of this size?
Yeah, I don't think the problems we have infrastructure-wise keeping up with growth are going to be solvable by the municipal tax base. Property taxes were never designed to do that. And they're imprecise in terms of they're not necessarily strongly connected. There is a connection, but they're not necessarily strongly connected to people's actual ability to pay the way income tax is. And so for us to really kind of solve that, there's going to need to be conversations with, the federal government and the provincial governments in terms of, well, how do we fund things? And this isn't a problem that's unique to Halifax. Every municipality faces the same sort of challenge, particularly the growing ones of you're growing and you can do some things, but you don't have the resources to keep up with it all. So it really is going to come down to whether or not as a country we're willing to, rethink how we fund and deliver infrastructure in a way that actually is up to the challenges that we face.
Okay, 902-405-6000. Brian's giving us a call. Hello, Brian.
Hey, how's it going today?
We're going well.
Good. I had a question for Sam.
Okay, go ahead.
Wondering about the canal project in downtown Dartmouth. Nobody seems to really know what's going on or what the purpose of this thing is. Maybe if Sam could tell us a little bit about the purpose of the project and what benefits it's going to bring to the people of Dartmouth.
Sure, happy to. The first main thing is the first major benefit is if we get a repeat Hurricane Beth storm hitting us, downtown Dartmouth won't flood out because the existing pipe that ran under the streets there and up to Sullivan's Pond, undersized and failing. for what's coming at us weather-wise. So the first thing to know is it was kind of a have-to project because the alternative was leaving downtown Dartmouth at risk of flooding. So that was the initial impetus. And then along the way, there's the opportunity when you're tearing all that up to achieve a whole bunch of other objectives, the first being environmental. You get the fish back up into the Lake Veinotte watershed for the first time in basically 100 some odd years. And that will have water quality benefits for Lake Veinotte and Lake Micmac and all the feeder kind of streams and lakes. You've got redevelopment potential, Dartmouth Cove, that waste industrial land. This is a bit of a connecting it back into downtown Dartmouth and getting redevelopment into that area that we want to see changed. So Canal Street and what used to be Maitland. And you get the transportation piece, which is connecting that harbor trail up to Lake Veinotte, to the Lake Veinotte trail system. So there's a whole bunch going on in this. It's economic, it's stormwater, it's disaster mitigation, there's environmental. It's a very solid project and a very big deal in downtown Dartmouth.
Okay, well, that's pretty clear. Thanks for taking my call.
Thanks, Brian. Take care. 902-405-6000. Here's an email from Scott. Scott says, please ask, when do we get electric buses? How many are in use, and is infrastructure in place for these buses? Sam, did you want to take this one, or Jean?
So, sorry, I missed the opening there. It was something in them buses.
Yeah, on the subject of the email is electric buses, and the questions are, when do we get the buses? How many are in use, and is infrastructure in place for these buses? It comes from Scott.
So I think we have 5 or 10 or something like this. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. We've had the demonstration bus for a while, and we've been putting it through its winter testing. And we've got work that's been done at Ragged Lake, which I think is largely complete at this point, which is what you need to actually run the fleet. The bigger piece, we won't be able to electrify all the buses that come out of the Dartmouth side from Burnside yet, because the Burnside Transit garage just can't handle that yet. So right now, the electric buses we're getting, they're going to operate out of Ragged Lake. So the infrastructure is in place largely, and we're starting to get our first ones.
Okay, so no possibility of a halt or a pushback or anything relating to electric buses, just so constituents know and listeners know, full steam ahead, pun not intended, right, Sam?
Entirely. I mean, electric buses are better environmentally, and they're better just like you think of a street like Alderney Drive, which is in downtown Dartmouth, or a place like Goddington Street that has lots of buses. And the buses can, as much as they're really important for transportation, they do have a negative impact on, kind of quality of life in those spaces as they rumble by consistently. So when they go electric, suddenly that roar of the diesel engine goes away and becomes just that electric hum. So there's a quality of life piece as well. And it's worth noting that the funding we receive from the other orders of government means that this was like a no-brainer for the municipality. The price was essentially the same as buying diesel because of the funding that we were given for electric, and then we save on the operating cost over the long term. So absolutely no-brainer for us.
Okay, fair enough. 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. For Councillors on the Hot Seat, if you've got a question for the councillors, give us a buzz, 902-405-6000. We'll be right back. All right, it's Councillors on the Hot Seat. Jean St. Amand, Sam Austin on the line. Got room for you as well. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Roger, hello.
How are you doing today?
Doing well.
Boy. I'm in Sam Austin's district there, and I live on Pine Street. So in behind me, in behind the credit union, there's a big parking lot, and there's 2 search floodlight security lights that are out right at it's on Devonshire Drive in behind Pine Street there. There's a playground, there's a skate park. Sam probably knows the area. And there's 2 floodlights that are out, and they've been out for a couple of years actually. And the other issue is I share a backyard with some neighbors, and our backyard has been flooded for 6 weeks now, and there's something wrong with the drainage. The drainage comes down in between the skate park and the the playground and goes in underneath the playground, underneath the big parking lot, where any old iron and the back of the credit union. But it's taken forever to go down, and like it's a duck pond now. Like I got a couple of ducks as pets. I mean, maybe that's a good thing, but anyway.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Thanks for the call. I know that spot. I know it well. In fact, I'm just up on Tulip Street, so very much in the neighborhood. And the lights, if memory serves, Devonshire is a private lane. Like there's only a small section at the front that's actually ours. And I believe those lights are on the private property and they don't belong to the city. The drain, thank you for bringing that to my attention. That is one that has plagued us for a little while now. Parks has had equipment in the past to try and unclog that, and it sounds like it's right back to where it was. So I will reach out to them. I think we've got a bit of a bigger infrastructure thing there because all the kind of unplugging it sort of measures have just really not worked.
Yeah, well, I'll just say one thing about the drain. It did get cleared out about a year or so ago, and everything was fine. But this year, it's just taken forever again. It seems maybe it's because the ground may be still frozen, might be still some ice in there. But it's been 6 weeks. Like I like to go out and sit in my backyard and maybe have a little fire, blah blah blah, whatever. But it's like I can't do anything because it's flooded.
Yeah,
anyway,
I will reach out to Parks.
It's getting a little better. But it's just very sluggish, very sluggish. Anyway, that's all I got. But thanks
it shouldn't
for listening.
be that way. Yeah, no, I'll reach out to Parks for you, and it's an issue they know. It's a spot that I've had several conversations with over the years, so it will not be a surprise, and we'll see what we can do about it.
Thanks, Roger.
It's an old area there.
Thanks,
what about the lights? What you say about the lights? It's not your...
I'm not 100%. I'm going to have to double check that, but because they're not in the park. If they're the lights, I think you're meaning they're on the private property and they don't belong to the city.
Okay, I wonder who owns that. Okay, thanks anyway. Have a good day.
I think it would be with the garage if they're the ones I'm thinking.
Well, that's any old iron, and I don't know. I don't think they own it because they lease that from the credit union. So maybe it's the credit union that owns those lights because they own the parking lot. So maybe that's what it is. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Peter, hello.
Hi, good morning, guys. Two quick questions. One is I called in about a month ago in regards to the city coming up with a new plan to deal with potholes. And my understanding is that the report is out and the amount of potholes this year is double what they were last year. And I'm wondering if any of that is a result of electric vehicles that will be twice as much as a normal vehicle. And I wonder if a new plan has been put in place because the pothole plan that's been used for the last 20 years isn't working. And then the second issue is I noticed that the councillors voted to stop using X. And 75,000 people in RM that rely on X for emergency reports. And I'm wondering how they plan on notifying anybody who's traveling from away on any emergency situations that happen in the Halifax. It seems like it was short-sighted and a knee-jerk reaction. And it's actually nonsensical. And it just doesn't make sense. So I'm wondering, can that be reversed? Or is that something that everybody's backed themselves into a corner on and it's not going to be able to back away from? The reality of it is people, when fires were happening, our biggest fires in the province 2 years ago, they relied on X for updates. And the city walking away from that just doesn't there's no common sense or rationale in it at all.
Okay, either councillor?
Well, I can jump in on the discussion of X anyway.
Okay.
X as a platform is not reliable for emergency use. The algorithm determines how quickly you see things, and so there are instances where you push something out expecting that people will wind up seeing it, and they don't wind up seeing it for several hours, or they see it on the basis of who's interacting with it and not specifically because you follow the city's account. So there are other mechanisms that we use in order to ensure that people are aware, particularly in emergency situations like HFX alerts and our own website. And hopefully we'll wind up seeing additional resources added for emergency use as a result of the motion that Council passed a couple of weeks ago that I had put forward, looking at an examination of what tools we can use to more effectively reach residents under every circumstance, not just emergencies.
Well, that's unacceptable. That one doesn't really work, guys, because even the new platform that you're proposing, there's very few people that use it. I don't know anybody that uses it, actually, and people are saying that it just doesn't... I realize that you're trying to come up with a reason not to do business with X, but you're falling short.
I'm not specifically looking for any reason not to use one platform or another. My motion was about what platform should we use in order to affect communication with residents that is as effective and reliable as we need it to be under every circumstance. There's lots of feedback that we received at Council over the course of the budget process in looking at development applications where residents said that they had no idea something was happening. And that's in spite of regular posts on all social media platforms going out to notify residents of what's occurring. The channels that we have, as much as we rely on them, are not necessarily effective in reaching our audience. And so we're looking for alternatives that will ensure that we're able to do just that.
So explain to me why you can't use both, because I listened to one councillor who said that they were getting rid of X because Elon Musk was at war with Canada. And I just looked at that and said, there's a load of nonsense. So why don't you explain to the listeners why you can't use both?
Social responsibility does play into what decisions that we wound up making as a council, and that was one of the specific things that we looked at, was whether or not it was incompatible with the values that we feel like we hold in our representing our residents.
Could you explain what those values are? Why we're going to war with somebody who hasn't declared war on us? I'm just saying, it sounds, what I'm hearing when I go out to coffee with my friends, it sounds like a lot of woke nonsense.
Well, I mean, that's one possible interpretation. My feeling was that moving away from X was a responsible thing to do because there is such vitriol in that environment, and we don't have the ability to ensure that our message is actually reaching our audience effectively on that channel. Or, I mean, even the switch to Blue Sky. I understand why an alternative was looked at, but I think we need to look a little bit more broadly at some other alternatives as well. I'm not a user of X myself, specifically because I don't feel like supporting that particular platform is compatible with how I view communication with residents.
Well, I guess part of the issue is you're not hired to, and you weren't hired and voted in to do what you believe. You were hired to do what the people who voted you in believe. And my understanding on this is that you're going to risk people's lives in the event of emergencies, because anybody that's traveling from away, they're going to say, what's this Blue Sky? It just doesn't make sense. And there's no reason that both platforms can't be implemented. Failure to use the most used platform in Canada right now is nonsensical. That's the point I'm trying to make. I know that you guys are in a position where you've dug in and you don't want to back up. But I'm going to tell you that in the event of major fires or accidents on the road or other different things, it just doesn't add up. And basically what I'm trying to get council to say is this needs to be reversed.
Sam, what's your take on this? Because I think the caller's making some valid points, to be honest with you.
At the risk of being the woke nonsense, Elon Musk is very much part of a government that means us ill. Very much. Like it's not Mark Zuckerberg who's kind of, there. Elon Musk is right there with Trump. He has said that Canada, what was the quote? It's not a real country.
Not a real country.
The guy does not mean us well at all. And we need to look at options that we have. This is a little bit symbolic, but I think it's an entirely appropriate thing to do in the time we are.
I guess, Sam,
you can let me.
Sam, let me interject here. Peter, I think what you're trying to say is, among the things that you said, the point that I think that you make is that people who aren't in tune with politics or don't care about whatever, and if there's a safety issue or if there's an advisory that's given out on X and they don't know the inner workings or inner politics of HRM Council, then they don't get the information potentially on X, which is still widely used. That's potentially a safety issue. Is that one of your concerns, Peter?
100%. For example, everybody that's going to show up here on cruise ships, they don't know anything about what's happening on this new Halifax system. And if we have one councillor that's dug in and he's got an issue with Donald Trump and Elon Musk, there's no way that man should be in a position where he can threaten the safety of people.
All right, Sam, I think that's a legitimate point. What's your response to that?
Well, I think let's not overstate the safety piece here. It wasn't so long ago in Portapique that we were, the RCMP were under a lot of scrutiny because they relied only basically on X to get out the emergency messaging. There's many channels to communicate with people in an emergency. If something is an utter emergency, you press the button.
Right. So Sam, in fairness,
let's not overstate.
No, we're not overstating it. But I think Peter's point is what's the point? What's wrong with including X among all the other platforms that you use if it's included? Peter, is that your point?
Three things.
Actually, you nailed it, Todd.
Okay.
The issue is, because we have somebody who dislikes Donald Trump, we have a major issue here, and it's a safety issue. And good luck explaining it to people who are here on cruise ships or people traveling up here that are visiting Nova Scotia that there's some kind of an issue that one of the policies, and nobody can find stuff on X, which they will be relying on coming from the U.S. They don't realize that a couple of councillors in Halifax have major issues on this, and they don't care.
Okay, Sam?
So if a tourist is up from the U.S., my understanding of emergency alerts, if they're looking at X on the cell phone, if we had a situation, you press that button and they get an emergency alert on their phone just like anyone locally here, alerting them to what's going on. So again, let's not overstate the safety piece. This is primarily an information piece. And I think it's inappropriate for the municipality to decide what channels we want to share information in. And, X has running against it. It's got the Trump Elon Musk factor, but it has changed. It used to be you could follow and get information from it without an account. That has changed, so it's not as wildly available as it used to be. And the moderation and tenure on it has also changed over the years because of changes that have been made to the platform. And so it's number one about making a statement, but there's also legitimate other concerns about that platform. And so, I think we're okay on this one, and we'll just have to agree to disagree.
Okay, Peter.
You know what?
Go ahead.
Excuse me, Todd, but I think there's probably 250,000 other people who strongly disagree with you. I mean, if you have an issue, that's fine, but now you're jeopardizing the safety of people in HRM. And I agree with Todd 100%. If you can push one button, you can push others. You've got your own issues with Donald Trump and Elon Musk. You're going to have to keep those, under wraps on your own. And I don't believe as a councillor you have the right to jeopardize anybody's safety.
Okay, well, we belabored it. Thanks for the point.
Jeopardizing anyone's safety.
Thanks for the call, Peter. Appreciate it. Take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. For Councillors on the Hot Seat, we'll be right back. All right, talking to our councillors, Jean St. Amand, Sam Austin. We got some time for you as well, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Mike's giving us a call. Hello, Mike.
How's it going?
Going well.
I'm just, I don't want to talk about the X thing, but being someone who doesn't like Elon Musk or Donald Trump and being someone who doesn't even use Twitter, I still agree with the last caller that I think your personal political opinions are getting in the way of municipal management, and I truly think that's wrong, but I digress. Today is the magical day of the year that's the most stressful for probably every single parent in the HRM, and that's trying to get their kids into summer camp. And this year did not disappoint. Both parents have to take pretty much the morning off to sit there and try and get their kids into camp, where a rec center in Prospect doesn't use the Halifax Rec sign-up program, and theirs is easy breezy, piece of cake, stress-free, easy to register for. I'm just wondering, how come it's so hard and we can't figure out that Halifax Rec summer camp registration, or even things like swimming and aquatics and a lot of things that Halifax Rec has this stranglehold on. There's not a lot of other summer camps outside of Halifax Rec. There's not a lot of swimming programs outside of Halifax Rec. How come it is so frustratingly hard for parents to register their kids for this stuff?
Can I just ask clarifying, do you mean so hard to register and that you get in there and everything's booked up, or so hard to register just the system you got to operate in?
Both.
Both.
So the new system this year, when you sign up for a program and go back, you have to go back and find every other program again. There's just no ease of use. And I thought I had some hopes this year that the new program was going to be easier, but it seemed just as frustrating, if not a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm hoping that will improve there as this is implemented. We're still very early days, and this is the opening year of. We weren't even planning to replace the software. The software we had was dropped in North America, and so then we had to go to a new provider. So I'm hoping that will improve as it's fully kind of rolled out. The availability piece, especially I know swimming lessons. I mean, I have 2 kids of my own. I'm not so far removed from those years. It is a struggle, and it's a struggle resourcing wise, right? There's the demand for space just exceeds the spaces we have available. And so if we want to do better on it, it's going to require some significantly, increased investment in this area to provide more. And we're kind of at that point, like a lot of our summer programming, it relies on students. There's limits in terms of how much more you can get out of that. So you're potentially into some other kind of wage models and, other sorts of workers to do these things. So it is a challenging space.
But do we not feel like that's a worthy investment? I mean, just figuring out how hard it is to get kids into summer camp. So for me, for example, now we have 4 weeks out of an 8-week summer that our kids can't get in summer camp. And it's just that's going to be weighing on our heads. And I'm sure I'm not alone in this area.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. It's, like I said, I've been through those kinds of Hunger Game experiences with my own kids where, you're sitting there hitting refresh, right at the time, and then you're scrambling, right, if you've overslept or forgot that this was the day. So I get where you're coming from. I wish I had an easy fix answer for you.
Right. So now I don't want to take up too much more time, but I guess Going back on my question a little bit, how come Prospect, which is a rec facility, how come they have such an easy system? Why aren't we just adopting the things that are working instead of having everybody do it a little different?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with Prospect system. I mean, this is sounds like I don't know that area well. I'm going to guess that this is one of the HRM-owned buildings, but run by a community center group, and so it's outside of the main kind of process that we have. I think when you're small, you have advantages of being able to work at a different scale that can make these things a little bit easier. I'm not sure that just kind of saying, well, let's just buy the same software Prospects is using and apply it to the scale of the HRM Parks and Rec system, that's doable. But I'm happy to ask staff on that.
Sure. Okay, perfect.
Thanks, Mike. Take care. All right, take care. Bill, hello.
Hi, Todd.
Hi, pal.
I want to ask the councillors there. I'm not sure. Is any of them looking after Point Pleasant Park?
What do you mean looking after?
Well, in other words, in their district.
I don't think so. No.
Okay. What I want
District 7.
District
what
7.
I want to say is that you got a canteen down there that's. I can't believe they're not using that there for food all these years. Why it's not put up for tender? Apparently, it's up for tender this year, and it's time that bunch down there moved out of there or went somewhere, even if they went to Fripp's old superintendent's place up there, and Sable Island Trust or something's got that tied up. So, I mean, I'd like to see an ad in the paper, and apparently the tender's up this year, an ad in the paper saying that Point Pleasant Park Canteen's up for tender for food, which it should be. What do you think?
Either of you want to answer or respond?
I don't honestly know enough about the ins and outs down there of the spaces to really be able to offer anything other than just to say, I mean, providing food options in parks is always a good thing. It can be a tough business to kind of run. But if you can't do it in Point Pleasant, I don't know where you could, because it's one of the most visited parks in the whole region.
Agreed.
Okay, Bill. Thanks for the call, pal. Appreciate it. Take care, bud. 902-405-6000. John, thanks so much, my friend. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Todd.
Sam, thanks to you as well.
Thanks, Todd.
All right, take care, guys. Jean Saint Amand, and that is Sam Austin, and that's Councillors on the Hot Seat. Now, what is on your mind? Perhaps some of you, I get a few emails from people responding to the Twitter debate. Perhaps some of you might want to pick up on that or whatever else you've got in your mind. 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us again, 902-405-6000. Mayor Andy Fillmore will deliver his first State of the Municipality address at a business audience in downtown Halifax later today. After years of hearing from Mayor Savage, this marks Fillmore's first formal address since taking office. It's hosted by the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. What do you think of the state of the municipality? What do you think that the state of HRM is? Is it in good shape, bad shape, heading in the right direction, wrong direction? What are your thoughts on it? Obviously, nothing's perfect, and every municipality has its challenges, including HRM. But what are your thoughts on the direction in which we're heading here in HRM? What do you think some of the biggest challenges are? What are some of the good things about living in this region are? Well, there are a lot of good things. Let's face it. 902-405-6000. Continuing conversation on Twitter and the fact that council has voted to not use Twitter, the municipality, and a caller brought up this question to the councillors and said that he doesn't get it. He called it virtue signaling or woke or whatever terminology you want to use. I think that when all is said and done, it's look. I think there's some legitimacy to the point that the caller was making, in that for many people who aren't plugged in or dialed into the inner workings of municipal politics here in Halifax, that they would still look to Twitter for postings and in particular in times of an emergency. Now, is that overstated? Perhaps, because as Sam Austin pointed out, the interprovincial alert system, which gets sent to everybody's phone in the region, would be enacted if it were something very serious. But look, if you're going to use Blue Sky or Facebook or Instagram or whatever you want to use, what's to adding one more for disseminating information? So it is, when all is said and done, a political statement. That's what it is, and for good or for bad. Let's at least call it what it is. What are your thoughts on that? Again, some emails from people who disagree with the municipality dropping X. Perhaps some of you would agree with it, and I know that some of you do, and think that it was the right move. What are your thoughts on that? A new study shows Haligonians are still welcoming to American terrorists despite political tensions between the two countries, so some concerns remain. The new survey from Narrative Research shows 83% of Haligonians are still open to welcoming American tourists. What are your thoughts on this? I think that I certainly wouldn't be unwelcoming to an American tourist. Quite the opposite. I think that we should welcome anybody who comes to our region. That's the Canadian way, and that only makes sense. That's good for business. We rely heavily on tourism. It's a massive economic driver in this region. So I can't imagine somebody saying, I would be negative to an, or I would be rude to an American tourist. I don't get that. But maybe some of you feel that way. What are your thoughts on the federal election, which is happening, of course? So I think we're at the midway mark. It's a pretty big week with the French and English debates happening later in the week. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre promising to tighten financial transparency rules for elected officials is using that promise to take aim at Liberal Mark Carney. He continues to call for transparency and suggests that Poilievre is, or rather Carney is conflicted with China because he got that $250 million loan from a Chinese loan company. I'm assuming it's a state-run company. Most are in China. And again, the offshore tax haven in which Carney's business has utilized and utilizes. And look, the argument could be made that many billionaires and many large companies use this, and that nothing illegal is done. But aside from the legal ethics, do you, as a taxpayer and as an electorate, do you find that this distasteful or uncomfortable with it? Or do you not care about Mark Carney and his financial situation? 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Or whatever else you've got in your mind on this Monday. Again, 902-405-6000. Let's kick it off with Jim. Hello, Jim.
Good morning, Todd. How you doing?
I'm well, you?
Congratulations to you and your lovely wife.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much.
Now, I'd like to comment on Twitter first, if I could.
Sure.
I think it's very dangerous as a former commander and first responder when we start playing with social media and all the other news media or whatever. We have to go by whatever works best. So I'm curious as to whether council actually had consultations with the police chief and the fire chief in particular as to what they felt about what was the best communications method to notify us of what's going on. Now, the province has a responsibility as well, and there should be clear guidelines as to what works best. So it all comes down to what works best. But I think you're right, and I think your previous caller is correct when council leaned toward their subjective feelings against Trump and Musk. So I think that's a little bit dangerous to steer your personal feelings and sort of a pushback on the Americans when it could very well threaten the public safety. So it should be reviewed, and that's my opinion on that one.
Okay.
The other one is the election coming up. So last week, Dan had a great show. A lot of people were calling in support of PP, Polyev. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give my 2 cents worth and hope that Carney does well in the French elections or French debates. Mm-hmm. He had a French debate yesterday or the day before with Polyev, and from what I understand, he came out very well. He made a few little mistakes, but overall he was well received. That's Carney. So any listeners that haven't made up their mind, stay tuned for this week. But I'll go back to the Twitter business. It's very dangerous, and unless I haven't heard from the mayor yet. I know he's giving a State of the Union, you said, or something, or
State of the Municipality address. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, and I think the city is on the right path. He's had some trouble with some councillors who just don't seem to jump on board with him on too many issues. But I think Andy has the right approach, and we'll see what happens down the road. And that's about all I have to say today, Todd.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Appreciate the call. Take care. All right, 902-405-6000. Hello, John.
Hey, Todd. Congrats on everything to you and the missus there.
Hey, thanks, pal. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I sent you the tweet of this. That last guy is a retired cop, I believe. I want him to see this. So the Conservative member of Parliament, Larry Brock, he was a retired prosecutor. I don't know if you know this about me, Todd, but I was a correctional officer for 1 year.
I didn't know that, actually. I did not know that.
Okay, anyway, so the inmates are allowed to vote. And your last caller there, I want that Jim guy to check this out, too. So Larry Brock, I sent you the tweet of this. So the inmates are allowed to vote. So the Liberal Party, it's a Government of Canada piece of paper. They're giving it to all the inmates in jail. And it's explaining like how they're going to go harder on crime and all this if they get in. Basically, I've sent it to you. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just everyone out there, Larry Brock, Twitter, and this thing will come up. But they're actually going so low as to try and get the inmate vote.
Okay, I guess so low. Some would say that would be an opportunity. They are an electorate. Why not try and sway their vote, John?
I guess, but man, like when you're going and pulling and file and literally putting your into prisons for criminals.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's just like a little too much.
Well, okay, but again, like I said, my pushback, John, would be that they're not always going to be incarcerated. At some point, they're going to be introduced to society. So why should they not have a say over who politician or who forms government?
Yeah, no, but they're allowed to vote while they're in jail. Is the point?
Yeah, no, I get that, but I guess again, these are people who will be. So you feel as though that if you're incarcerated, you shouldn't have the right to vote? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's just the fact that it's like they want criminals out of jail. They're trying to get the inmate vote by saying we're going to go softer on crime and everything, and it's right in that piece of paper that you guys can see and read for yourselves, and everyone out there listening.
I see. Okay.
It's not a good look, but anyway, I won't keep everybody, but just have a look at that, Todd. And
okay, so just to be clear, you're not suggesting that inmates shouldn't have the right to right to vote. You're saying that you feel the Liberals are pandering to them by saying that if you vote for us, then you can continue with this criminal activity and not face long jail terms. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah. Thank you, Todd. It's Monday, so my head's not perfectly clear yet.
Okay, John.
You said it for me.
Okay, appreciate it. Take care, pal.
You too, buddy.
Okay, 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. I see that Mark Carney's making an announcement today somewhere. Where is he? In Quebec. And like a lot of these announcements, he's got a bunch of people standing in behind him. Usually it's at a business where the candidates go. Pierre Poilievre was, and they all do this. If they can find, and I'm curious how it works. If, in fact, you show up to work and you work for one of these businesses, that where an announcement is made, obviously the business leader would be a supporter of whoever the elected or whoever the prospective politician is. And so do you show up to work and do they say, listen, for the first hour today, you're not going to work. You're going to stand behind Mark Carney or Pierre Poilievre, and you're going to stand there and you're going to be a political prop? I don't know if that would be something I'd be comfortable with, because does that indicate that you're supporting them? I don't know. It's just a thought that I had. I don't know why. Things that go in my brain in and out pretty quickly. 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Let's continue to chat with John. Hello, John.
Good day. Welcome back.
Thank
Todd,
you, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Todd, on the subject about Mark Carney, his offshore holdings, companies, and whatnot, I'll just say this. You and I, as citizens of this country, we work, we pay our taxes, we are encouraged not to do anything under the table, and if we do, we're supposed to claim it as an income. For a leader, a prime minister of the country, because Paul Martin went through the same thing with his shipping company, which was registered in Panama for tax purposes.
Sure was, yeah.
So here we have leaders toting be Canadian, buy Canadian, keep the money in Canada, but our leaders are doing the opposite. It's a bad look. I don't care if it's legal. Mm-hmm. And it's only legal because they allow it to be legal. Trudeau was going to look in this with the Panama Papers.
Yeah.
Never heard a word, did you? And you will never hear a word because it's extremely wealthy people that do it, and that's okay.
Yeah, including the Irvings, of course, who own the shipyard here in Halifax, right?
Of course,
yeah.
Yes, of course. So I guess my response to that, if these people are allowed to get away with this, then our governments should lessen the taxpayer, the burden on the taxpayers. Mm. And there are many ways to do that. And I don't mean 1% at a time, which is a pittance.
Yeah.
Anyway,
John, okay, John, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Take care, bud. 902-405-6000. This is something that I've been talking about on talk radio for 2 decades now. Or tax havens, and nothing ever gets done about it. Nothing ever substantially gets done about it. And why is that? Well, because it's too difficult. That's why, when all is said and done, in my opinion. It's too difficult for CRA to utilize resources and hire the people to deal with the walls of accountants and lawyers that these billionaires have around them in order to shield them from the prying eye of CRA. And why it's legal, I have no idea. It blows my mind that it's legal, but it is. It's legal for Mark Carney and the Irvings and whomever else, if you're rich enough and powerful enough, to not pay taxes in this country. And that's wrong. It's absolutely fundamentally wrong, but will anything ever be done about it? Absolutely not. And sadly, because it would take immense, massive resources for CRA to crack down on this. So who do they crack down on instead? The small business owner, the restaurant owner, the electrician, whomever. That's who they crack down on because they're easy prey, soft targets. And I'm not suggesting that they shouldn't, but it's a double standard for sure. 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Hi, Gloria.
Congratulations, Todd, to you and Kelly.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it very much.
And I hope you have many wonderful years together. I have a question, though. You hit the jackpot here.
Okay.
When you got Kelly. Did you hit it again in Vegas?
No, I didn't gamble a nickel, to be honest with you. I did not.
Todd, excuse me. I've talked about this before, and I'm calling again. I'm so concerned about the poor people of Ocean Breeze, the rest of the 400 families who've now been told to leave with no place to go, all because that last council, not this council, some of them, but the last council and mayor voted to rezone that property with no need to do it until there was sufficient housing. But nobody seems to care, Todd.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
I was going to call Sam Austin and ask him how he felt, but I knew I'd only get a flippant answer.
Well, yeah, it's really sad, Gloria, when you humanize and you look at the people and the real people and the real stories, right?
I care about people.
Yeah.
It troubles me. And I care. I have one other thing for you.
Okay.
How would you feel if you were at a pancake breakfast and the Lieutenant Governor, Mike Savage, walks in with the Liberal candidate, Darren Fisher?
Not surprised. That's how I would be.
Do you think that's what the Lieutenant Governor is supposed to be doing?
Well, he would say that because he's the mayoral candidate or Darren Fisher. Yeah, I don't know, Gloria. Listen, it would be nice to think that we could detach and untangle politics from these things.
It's supposed to be nonpartisan, as I know it.
Right, it's supposed to be, but I think we all know that that's not the case, right? I don't know.
Well, we know how to get there.
Let me ask you this, Gloria. Do you think Darren Fisher is going to get any more votes? And maybe he will because of this endorsement?
This is the riding that Savage occupied before when he was MP.
That's right. So it's pretty a gimme. It's pretty much a gimme for the Liberals, is it not? At this point?
I don't know that it's a gimme. I'm not saying that. Yeah. I'm just saying how wrong that is for a Lieutenant Governor to walk into a pancake breakfast with the Liberal candidate. That's all I'm saying.
Perhaps, Gloria. I think you make a point there.
And I think a lot of people will share my view.
Okay, thanks, Gloria.
Thanks, Todd.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Peter, hello.
Hi, Todd. How are you?
I'm well. You?
Oh, not too bad. I'm down here in Bridgewater.
Nice.
I agree with you on these offshore tax havens. We've known for years that the Irvings, all they did was haul their oil up from Venezuela, have their boat stock in Bermuda overnight, and Irving Oil Bermuda Limited took care of everything, and they paid no taxes. They never paid any taxes.
That's right.
And all that's a lot of money.
Yep. And Peter, some would say this. Some would say that if you tax them to the hilt to the tax that they should be collecting here in Canada, that they would simply go elsewhere and they take their money elsewhere anyway. What's your response to that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we're not asking them. We're not taxing the shit out of them. We only want them to pay their share.
Yeah, that's right. But again, the argument, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but the counter argument out there is that if you tax rich people who can go to other jurisdictions, they'll pull up stakes and go elsewhere.
they'll go to the Cayman Islands or some other place.
Yeah.
Another topic before I don't bug you with.
Sure.
Mr. Carney said he had no association with a group of people that are strongly attached to the Communist Chinese Party in Beijing, China. Yet the photograph has surfaced of him buddy in a big group picture with all of them. So I find that a bit scary.
Well, that was before he was leader, though, correct?
I know, I realize that, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, we've got our own premier who's who's gone to China and to drum up business, and so it's not uncommon for political leaders to try and lobby other countries, including the Chinese government. That's not illegal, and it's not uncommon, to my knowledge.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, Peter.
Right,
thanks for the call, pal. Take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. We get some open lines for you. Folks, give us a call. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Quick email from Wayne, then back to the phones. Wayne, on the tax havens and the fact that Mark Carney has utilized a tax haven. Again, not the only Canadian Prime Minister ever to do so. We know that Paul Martin certainly did, and many influential business icons in this country have, including Irving. And this from Wayne says, playing devil's advocate, if any of your callers were to make $1 million, would they want to keep the $1 million or give $350,000 back in taxes? I think we both know the answer. I know you'll say, but we are not in the public eye, but just pointing out human nature. And look, I agree. I agree with what you're saying, Wayne. It's easy to say that what you should do when you're not in that situation. And I get why it boils people's butts who pay through the nose their taxes every day and see their income tax split in half or more, depending on your tax status, on your income status rather, and you see people paying no taxes who are filthy rich because they can skirt the law, or because the law allows it, because they have accountants that allow it. I get it. Is it morally wrong? Sure, I would say that it is. On the surface, and below the surface, on every level, it is wrong. But is it human nature? Yes. And is there an argument to be made that that without these opportunities, that some of these multi-billionaire would take their money elsewhere? Yes, they would. Now, is that enough of a reason to not change the law, or to not dig into it, or to not sway your vote? Well, I guess that's up to you, isn't it? 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. James, hello.
Good morning, Todd. Very happy for you and yours. Hope you have every happiness, sir.
Thank you.
On your very show a while back, you may recall former Mayor Mike Savage. In my mind, he smugly commented that he felt no conflict of interest with municipal councillors accepting cash donations towards their campaign from developers. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, my prime example is you look at Quimper Road in Roby, and they changed the bylaws. The highest building that could be there was the Atlantica Hotel at 11 stories. So they went behind camera and they put 30-story building up there. Mm-hmm. So that's just my thought on that. My thought that developers donating cash to municipal politicians, anyone seeing that as not conflict of interest, it gets back to your earlier comment. If we won $1 million, I want to keep every dollar.
Yeah, for sure.
And if I was a councillor and I had an option of taking some money from a developer that I likely would be successful in being elected and have a pension for the rest of my life. Yeah. So perhaps that's one thing, something some more attention should be brought to. The other thing I'll just leave with, two other things I'll leave with you quickly, is the Bedford Basin. You know, you drive by there and you look at it. They filled that in decades or a while back. That was filled in. I don't know how much it's seen the light of day, But someone should follow the money and see who's benefiting from that filling with the apartment buildings and the retail places. But I mean, logic would dictate if you followed the money, it would go right back to the politician's wallet. That's just common sense. On a positive note of politicians, I truthfully, sincerely can say, on behalf of our cul-de-sac, Catherine Morris has stepped up to the plate. And it took about 9 months, but you had to go through traffic planning. But there was a very serious health and safety issue. When we exited our street, we could not turn left due to the permitted parking. So once the traffic engineers looked at it, it was hands down a safety hazard. So kudos to, a positive story. Catherine Moore stuck on it for about 9 months.
There you go.
And now we can turn left off our street.
That's awesome. You can fight City Hall after all, eh?
Oh, I found out my 61 years, it's like raising children. You just got to be so consistent, and you just can't let up.
All right, so some love for a politician and a local councillor. Why not, on a Monday?
Yeah, absolutely, sir.
Okay, pal. Thanks, James.
Thank you very much. You're to me, you're an important fabric to this community. You give us the ability to speak.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the compliment. Take care. 902-405-6000. There you go. Catherine Morris. She's pretty sharp, I must say. Pretty good counselor, in my opinion. Of course, not everybody's going to agree with that, but that's politics. Mark, hello.
Good day, Todd. Just three quick things. Number one, I paid $27,000 in personal taxes last year, and I'm paying $4,000 by the end of the month because I didn't pay enough. And the other one is, I don't know if anybody noticed, Mike Savage. To me, he's a little scoundrel. He's got his money, his hands in everybody's pocket from federal, provincial, municipal. And when he quit the mayoralty in Halifax, is to let Fillmore in, and he knew he was getting that job from Trudeau as Governor General. The three of them, to me, were in cahoots when they came in, and I just find it disgusting. And the other one I find disgusting, too, is Sean Fraser. He quit before his time was up, and just because he felt he was going to lose. And after he found out that Carney was coming in, he had a good chance of winning again. Oh, let me get back in here. And I actually think he's now running in Preston Porter's Lake Echo area. He's not in his riding that he was before. And he's still taken over from Darrell Sampson. I think he's doing that because I don't think the people of his area were pretty happy with him for doing that. And I hope everybody kicks his ass out in the parking lot to get not to elect him because he doesn't deserve it as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, Mark. Appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Yeah, look, I can see why people think it's rigged. Why the game's rigged, why the political game is rigged. When you look at Mike Savage and was that deal cooked? Sure. I'm sure it was. I'm sure he knew he had that lieutenant governor post coming. But listen, the electorate here in Halifax had a choice, didn't they? They had a choice to vote somebody other than Andy Fillmore. And they did not. So in the end, the electorate wears it. And I'm not saying that was a bad choice, by the way. I'm not commenting on Fillmore as a choice. Mike Savage, same thing. He had, how many elections did he win? Now, what advantage did Mike Savage have? Well, he obviously had a pretty good family pedigree advantage there. But he took advantage of it. Not everybody does. Took advantage of his name and the family pedigree. I guess what they say, if you don't like it, then let your voice be heard at the ballot box. 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. Let's talk to Chris. Hi, Chris.
Good morning and welcome back, Todd.
Thank you, sir.
I bet they didn't, if they got to know you very well, they never would have let you leave Las Vegas.
Come on now.
So their loss, our gain.
There you go. Maybe they would have incarcerated me instead.
I don't know. Maybe you could have gone and met with Trump and straightened him the hell out.
Sure.
Look, Todd, I'm thinking for running for political office. And my platform is going to be, I'm going to raise your taxes and implement new ones. That's it. How do you think that'll go over?
I think it would flop.
No kidding. Well, what's all the support behind Mark Carney? Because that's all he's proposing to do. He hasn't got a platform. He's going to raise taxes. The carbon tax that's put in on industrial users, that's going to be raised. That's raising taxes because it's going to trickle down to us.
Yes.
It's going to implement new taxes. All of these retaliatory tariffs, all as they are, is a tax against Canadians buying the product coming across the border. So, but as Doug Ford has said as well, he's in favor of the same thing. And what they want to do is, we'll take care of you. We're going to give you handouts to offset the taxes that you're paying. Kind of sounds like the carbon tax rebate to me. Don't you?
Well, listen. So, do you support Paul Dev? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Chris. Just trying to gauge what you.
I 100% support Polyev. I was born into a hard left liberal family. Mm-hmm. My parents, grandparents, the whole way through. I voted both liberal and I voted conservative in the past. But Pierre Poilievre, in my opinion, is the only choice that we have if we want to get the hell out of this mess with Trump, and if we want to get out of a bigger mess, which is what's happened to our country in the last 10 years under Justin Trudeau.
Why is Poilievre the guy to do that? And I'm not being argumentative. I just want your opinion, that's all.
Well, just listen to him. He's the only one, first of all, he's the only one with the political experience, and that's what we need. We need someone with political experience. A lot of people out there hearing this are going to say, oh, no, you don't want a politician. No, that's exactly what we want. If your roof is leaking, you want a roofer. You don't want an electrician. You want a roofer. And that's what Poilievre is going to be. He's going to do something to our economy. He's going to do things that should have been done over the past 20 years, not all Trudeau's fault, because he inherited problems as well. I get that. But Poilievre will stimulate the economy. He's going to bring back pipelines. We're going to do things to make our economy sustainable. Handouts, be it the carbon tax rebate or these retaliatory tariff handouts that they're proposing to help out businesses and workers that are adversely affected, those things are not sustainable. We saw that with the COVID. The COVID payouts were unvetted payouts. Hundreds of millions of dollars it cost, increased our debt tremendously. Closing down was the worst thing they could have done, and that's exactly what Carney is going to maintain, that our economy stay stagnant. I want to make one quick point. You had a caller talking about Carney and the Beijing lobby group. Mm-hmm. I think the point he was trying to make, and that everybody's tried to make, and maybe it's lost on some people, is that Carney was questioned about that, and he denied knowing who the group was. Then subsequent to that, photos came out showing him posing in pictures or photographs with them. Right. So I think that's what he was your caller was trying to point out, and as well, other people have done the same thing, and I think you'll agree with me when you think about it, is that Carney was questioned and he lied about it. Oh, I don't know who they are.
Yeah. Look, Chris, I'm a firm believer in transparency at all times. I think that's the tonic that always does the trick, but I hear what you're saying. But a quick question for you. You mentioned that a politician is the right person because of their political skills and whatever. But wouldn't being devil's advocate here, wouldn't an economist with the pedigree of Mark Carney, wouldn't he be the guy that might be better suited to try and fix an economy?
No. Look at who you're dealing with Trump. He's a politician now. He's not an economist. He's a politician. Also, I think Mark Carney's pedigree has been highly over-exaggerated. While he was governor of the Bank of England, he printed money rampantly. That created inflation. He failed to regulate the British pensions industry, and that created a pension crisis that was forcing the collapse of the pension fund. The Bank of England had to step in and buy it out. Mark Carney, when he was in England, he had the choice at the end of his tenure. We're going to fire you or you quit. And he miraculously decided he would quit. As far as what he did here in Canada, it's not him we have to thank. Essentially, the Bank of Canada sets interest rates. Economic policy, especially macroeconomic policy, is the sole bailiwick of the federal government. And the federal government of the day, 2008, 2009, was Stephen Harper and Jim Flaherty. Jim Flaherty, in particular, set government policy during that, and that is what saved us in that.
Yeah.
Debacle.
Wasn't there some flap about Carney who was advising Flaherty at that time, and that has been debunked, or I'm not sure.
That has been debunked, I believe. Yeah. I think Carney was approached by Stephen Harper years ago to be one of his advisors. I don't know what happened with that, to be an economic advisor, because he has a resume, but as Pierre has said, it's not a plan. But one other thing about the financial crisis, in 1986, retired Supreme Court Justice Willard Etsy had a board set up where they reviewed the Bank Act and the regulations of the banking industry in Canada. They put stiff, resilient guardrails in to help protect the banking industry, as opposed to what the United States was at the time, and still is today to a certain degree, almost the Wild West of banking. That's why the states went under, or not the country went under, but why they had a bigger problem than we did here in Canada. It was a combination of things, but it was not in any way, shape, or form anything to greatly attribute Mark Carney for.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Appreciate the call. On the Carney and the Bank of England, it depends on where you go for information, quite honestly, and their interpretation. Liz Truss, who is the former British Prime Minister, is a hardline conservative. And obviously she's supporting, not obviously, but in my opinion, she's supporting her political cousins here in Canada. So it depends on where you go for your information. Like I always say, that you can get information which would suggest that Mark Carney, you can find it if you want to, did a great job as the governor of the Bank of England. So in this era of information and too much information, look, it's difficult to figure out sometimes what's right and what isn't and what's up and what's down, in my humble opinion. But I wanted to mention that Mark Carney, yes, Liz Truss, former UK Prime Minister, has been very critical and gotten a lot of oxygen, in particular on conservative right-leaning platforms, about the pitfalls of Mark Carney. But conversely, you can find other sources which praise his job, depending on where you look. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. David's giving us a call. Hello, David.
Good afternoon. I heard all these callers calling in, and I'd like to pass on the word that you are now Mr. Veinotte.
Yes.
And she is Mrs. Veinotte.
That's correct. She is.
Unless she kept her last name.
Nope, she changed her name, although she spelt it incorrectly on Facebook.
Oh, okay. And
it's the last time I'll say it. It's the last time I'll say it. I would say Vanessa's saying, "Don't say that ever again." No, I won't say that ever again. But anyways, yeah, she's a great girl.
Yeah. How about a Mr. and Mrs. Todd Veinotte show?
Oh my gosh, there's an idea. Perhaps I'll run it by Dan and see what Dan has to say.
There you go.
Here's the problem. If anybody heard her for 5 minutes, they wouldn't want to hear me anymore. So that's the challenge, that I got to walk a fine line with that one, pal.
Well, it's got to be 50-50 all the way, right?
That's what they say, but I don't buy that.
Yeah. Now, congratulations, but everybody's saying that, but I'm going to go. There you go, wedding march.
Wow, there you go, pal. Are you open for weddings if somebody wants you to do that?
If I find one that has lots of money, yeah.
Okay, lots of money. If you get lots of money and you want to hire David as your vocalist, then he's available. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Let's see here. A couple of emails that I wanted to read. This one from David says, talking about what Chris had to say, said, I just shake my head. One thing that is not a lot of common knowledge is that among Pierre's investments, he has one in particular fund that is heavily invested in Brookfield Management, Carney's company that he sits on all the time. I read that in a CBC article when I Googled Pierre Poilievre net worth. And from what I understand, Poilievre has divested fairly recently and quite hastily in some of his investments in order to shore up the pro-Canadian narrative in which he's spinning. But I think to your point is that a lot of us out here, it's like when banks make record profits. Everybody says here's CIBC or TD or whomever makes record profits again. Filthy Richie. There you go. Rich fat cats. But part of that story is, and a huge part of that story is that many of us, many of you out there who have any type of investment at all, and I'm talking mutual funds, I'm not talking day trading funds, I'm not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank perhaps, but if you have an RSP or a TFSA or something that's invested in the markets, you can be guaranteed, just about guaranteed, a certain percent of that portfolio, and in many cases, depending on your risk tolerance, is quite high in that you would have financials, which is banks. So when those banks do well, that fund goes up, and that fund, so it earns money for everybody. Just like when banks tank, the stock market plunges, and in particular people with mutual funds feel it because of that same reason. So the idea and the concept that banks are filthy rich and there's like a group of 15 people collecting all the billions and billions of dollars, that's not the case. Now, that said, the board is quite heavy when it comes to money that's being made there, and I'm sure that there could be more discretion when it comes to how that money is distributed. But I just think it's similar in a way. Anyway, thanks for the calls, everybody. We appreciate it very much. One other quick email I got to that I read and I wanted to read. Yes, this by way of correction. Jennifer sent this along, and thanks for sending it along. She says, Sean Fraser did not change ridings. He's still running in Central Nova, but the riding area increased with recent riding boundary changes. Antigonish is no longer in his riding. It's under Cape Breton. As a result, Central Nova extended over to the eastern shore like Lake Echo. So that's important information. Thanks for sending it along. Thanks for all the calls, everybody. We appreciate it. We'll open the phone lines again tomorrow between 11 and 12. Public Health continues to support measles vaccinations in Central Zone. We'll get to this when we come back. Central Zone Public Health will continue to offer enhanced access to measles vaccination for those eligible throughout April. Joining us to discuss all of this is Dr. Catherine Brown, Regional Medical Officer of Health for the Central Zone. Dr. Brown, thanks for joining the show.
Oh, thanks, Todd, so much for having me here today.
All right. So how much of an issue is measles right now in the region?
So across Canada, we're actually seeing a huge measles surge. We're actually seeing the most number of measles cases in Canada since the 1990s. So we're definitely paying attention what's happening elsewhere in the country. Closer to home, we actually have not yet seen a case of measles in Nova Scotia in 2025. We've actually only had one case in the last 5 years. But we're certainly watching the situation closely, and we're taking steps to make sure people have the opportunity to get vaccinated if they're eligible.
Any reason why this region would have been saved so far?
Well, what I could tell you is a lot of the transmission we're seeing are in communities that are under-vaccinated or less vaccinated. And sometimes it's just luck of the draw. So they're seeing a big cluster of cases in Ontario, but also in other provinces like Quebec, in Alberta and BC. And we just learned on Friday that recently there have been 2 cases in Prince Edward Island.
Okay, so tell us about the vaccination program and what's involved with this.
Yeah, for sure. So every Nova Scotian born after 1970 is eligible for 2 doses of measles-containing vaccine. And measles vaccine is one of the best vaccines we have out there. We've had it for over 50 years, and we know it's really safe and it's effective. So if you get 2 doses of that vaccine, you have above 98, 99% coverage, and you're considered protected for life. So we really encourage everyone to check their vaccine status and see how many doses they've received. And if they've only had 1 dose, or maybe they haven't had any doses, we encourage them to come on out and to get vaccinated. And there's a few different ways you can check your vaccine records. The easiest is probably going to the website, VaxRecordNS. That's VaxRecordNS .nshealth.ca, or they could reach out to their family doctor to see what they have on hand.
Okay, and what about the costs associated with this? How much does it cost the province? And obviously that's not the offset of treating people with who contract measles is much more, and protecting humans and people is obviously paramount. But what about the cost?
Yeah, no, so you're absolutely right. We know that prevention is a lot cheaper than having to treat people, especially if we can prevent spread in Nova Scotia. And so if you're going and looking for your measles-containing vaccine and you're a Nova Scotia resident, that vaccine is provided free of cost to you. And so I think that's really important for everyone to know. And there's a bunch of places where people can get that measles vaccine. So Nova Scotia and Central Zone, we're offering these special immunization clinics. We'll have these clinics every Saturday for the next few weeks. There's one at Millwood High School this weekend. In 2 weekends, there's one at JL Isley and at St. Agnes Junior High School. Those are all offered Saturdays from 9 to 3 p.m. But also stay tuned because we have more clinics that we're planning for in May. And then there's a bunch of other places you can actually go to get that free measles vaccine. And if you go to the website, novascotiahealth.ca/measles, on there, it can talk about all those places. You know, if someone's not in Halifax, they're somewhere else in the province, but listening into your show, Todd, where they can look up for themselves where they can get that vaccine, but their family doctor or their nurse practitioner, if they have one, or they could go to a community pharmacy clinic, or other public health offices, or the public health mobile unit are also offering measles vaccines in their area. And just on that question of cost, we know that if you get sick enough, and measles can be cause quite severe complications that you need a hospitalization, you know, that could cost the health system thousands of dollars. But more importantly, it really impacts the person and their family and their community. And so we're really in Nova Scotia trying to be proactive and prevent the spread of measles before it arrives in our province.
All right, what do you say to somebody who is right now on the fence about getting their kids vaccinated for whatever reasons? Perhaps they've read some information or whatever. Perhaps they're getting some advice from somebody. What advice do you give to that person that is on the fence, not yet totally committed to this?
Yeah. What I would suggest to them is that they open a conversation with a healthcare provider that they trust. That might be their family doctor, a nurse practitioner, a pharmacist, or if they'd like to call our local public health office, they could certainly speak to one of our public health nurses and really make sure that they're getting the information they need from a trusted and informed source to understand what are the benefits of the measles vaccine and what might be some of the risks, and then be able to have all the information they need to make that decision for themselves. You know, as a public health physician, I'm someone who knows that measles vaccines are safe and really effective, but I think everyone needs to make that own decision for their family, and the best place to do that is to have those individual level conversations with a trusted healthcare provider.
Okay, so just a reminder again, where can people get all the information about the clinics?
So they can go to nshealth.ca/measles. And if you're in the Halifax area, our next clinic is at Millwood High School this upcoming Saturday from 9 to 3 o'clock. It's drop-in, so they don't need any appointment, but they do need their health card. And the last thing I would add, Todd, is sometimes it can be a bit confusing to know, do I need a dose or do I not? Because it varies a little bit by your age. And so what I would say is on that website, annishealth.ca/measles, we also have it outlined how many doses of vaccines are you recommended based on your age. Right now, every single child is normally offered 2 doses at 12 and 18 months. And of course, they are eligible for catch-up doses if those childhood vaccines were missed. We're trying to make sure it's as easy as possible for Nova Scotians to access vaccines. But if you're born in that cohort between 1970 and 1995, you might have only been offered 1 dose of vaccine as a kid. And so another dose is generally recommended for that age group. And so I know there's lots of adults out there who might fall in that age group, and that is a particularly important age to check your vaccine records.
Okay, great stuff. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
All right, you as well. Take care. Dr. Catherine Brown, Regional Medical Officer of Health for the Central Zone. When we come back, BMO and Kids Help Phone are stepping up for those you love. That when we return. On May 4th, the BMO Walk So Kids Can Talk is taking place at 16 locations across the country to raise funds and tackle the rising demand to ensure continued access to mental health support for any young person in need. In Halifax, the walk will take place at the Amera Oval. Joining us to discuss all of this is Darren Mastropaolo, Kids Help Phone's Vice President of Innovation and Data. Darren, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for having me.
All right, so some alarming statistics I'm reading here in your release. Youth in crisis, according to provincial stats, more than ever before died by suicide in Nova Scotia in the year 2022, with young people being among the rising casualties. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for youth in Canada, and nearly a quarter of service interactions with Kids Help Phone are about suicide. If that doesn't grab your attention, nothing will.
Yeah, absolutely. Kids Help Phone is a beloved organization that provides essential services for young people for any mental health challenge that they're going through. And that scary statistic that about a quarter of our interactions are about suicide holds pretty consistent year over year. We've seen over the last 4 years the number of youth that are 13 and under who have contacted about Kids Help Phone about suicide has more than doubled. And so now more than ever, Kids Help Phone is an essential service for youth who are struggling. And it's not just about suicide. Young people reach out to us feeling anxious about school or their home life. Some of the top issues are depression. They reach out to us about relationships, anxiety, isolation. So it's not just about suicide, but that is an alarming part of the service delivery that we offer.
All right, tell us about your involvement in this and what drew you to this.
So my role as VP of Innovation and Data is really to provide the next generation of Kids Help Phone's products and services. So we offer a number of different access points to youth across Canada. Our services are free, 24/7. They're available in multiple languages. And we offer service through phone, chat, text, online. We have peer-to-peer resources. And so my role in leading the innovation team is to make sure that we're staying on the leading edge of using technology to increase access for youth, decrease barriers to entry, and use our data to really inform that service design and make sure that the public is well informed on trends related to the youth in our communities.
What are some of the barriers to entry?
Help is hard to find. We hear from young people all the time that there are too many options out there without one central place to go for feelings that they may be feeling for the first time. Young people are also often not taken seriously when it comes to their mental health. They're told to toughen up, or the older people in their lives say, when I was your age, it was different. But young people that are struggling, that isn't a helpful first line to hear from somebody that they're looking for support from. So Kids Help Phone really is focused on using our data to understand where those young people are that need help and making sure that our services are integrated into the platforms where they spend their time. We're also in schools through our Counselor in the Classroom program, and we do a lot of work with community organizations to make sure that our service access points are available whenever somebody needs it.
All right. Might there be a way to, I suppose we could always improve outreach, but what other avenues might be for outreach that perhaps you haven't already utilized?
So we see that young people are often struggling when they're using social media platforms, when they're on gaming platforms, when they're searching for content online. And generative AI has changed the way that information is kind of filtered and accessed. And so there's a lot of emerging trends that we're keeping our eye on to make sure that our service access points are baked into the platforms where young people spend their time, and that they don't have to try too hard to seek out a service like Kids Help Phone, that we provide access points right at the point of crisis or when they are deciding that they're ready to reach out for help.
Okay, why do you feel as though? What are some of the contributing factors that are perhaps adding to the challenges that young people are dealing with today? Social media, I'm sure, is part of it. What are some of the core issues? Poverty. What are some of the issues?
So pretty consistently we see the top issues are anxiety and stress, depression, suicide, isolation, and relationships. One of the challenges that Kids Help Phone helps to solve is that young people are suffering in silence. 75% of our service users say that they've shared something with Kids Help Phone that they've never told anyone else before. And that stat really shows the trust that young people have with Kids Help Phone. We've also seen our service volume more than double over the past 4 years. So at the start of COVID, we really saw volume increase as young people had to stay home, potentially in situations where they weren't safe. Also, their support systems were stripped from them. And so digital service access really became the lifeline for a lot of young people. And after COVID has subsided, our service volumes didn't really go back down. So we found this new normal where the people that had reached out to Kids Help Phone during those years really stayed consistent. That trend stayed consistent.
Okay, so again, if people want to know more about all of this, direct them as to where you'd like them to get all the information, all the relevant information for what's coming up in May and anything else in relation to Kids Help Phone.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. So the BMO Walk So Kids Can Talk is a great way to get involved with Kids Help Phone's life-changing work and to support the youth in your lives. Halifax is one of 16 sites across Canada, and the Walk So Kids Can Talk will take place this year at the Amera Oval. Registration opens at 10 a.m. and the walk begins at 11. It's a wonderful event. It's family-friendly. People bring their friends, their neighbors, their dogs, their kids, and everybody really rallies behind Kids Help Phone to support youth mental health. You can register at walksokidscantalk.ca to fundraise or register just to come out and show your support in our amazing community here in Halifax.
Darren, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Todd.
All right, take care. Darren Mastropaolo, Kids Help Phone's Vice President of Innovation and Data. Data or data? I say it different ways. Data or data? I think I usually go with data. Although Data on Star Trek's name was Data. Remember Data, Vanessa? Do you remember that? Next Generation? So based on that, it should be Data, but I like Data. Just because. What the hell? Tomato, whatever. Yeah, I know it's Monday. My first day back. Give me a break, folks. Canada's main stock index is up about 300 points in late morning trading. U.S. markets pushed higher than ever. Even after Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said U.S. tariff exemptions on electronics like smartphones and laptops would only be a temporary reprieve. The comment came after the White House had last week said it would exclude electronics from broader reciprocal tariffs. The U.S. pulled back on some tariffs but raised rates on goods coming from China to 145%. Canada is still being hit by 25% duties on steel, aluminum, and some auto imports into the United States. And look, I've been away, as you all know, for a couple of weeks, but I'm not going to lie, I did pay some attention to some news, in particular when I was in the States. I watched some of the news channels and some of the commentary and read some of the papers and all that goes with it, just because. And the only word that comes to my mind through all of this is absolute utter chaos. That is what this has been, is utter chaos. And it's hard for me to believe, based on everything that I've seen, and look, I'm just one person with one opinion, and I get it. Far from as intelligent as a lot of you out there. But based on everything I see, I don't see any coherent plan here from Trump. I really don't. And anybody involved in his administration. I think it's just whatever he wakes up and whatever falls into his mind, it goes out his mouth, usually through one of his social media platforms, Truth Social, at 2 a.m. or whatever it is. I don't think there's a plan here. I really don't. And when I watched his cabinet, and they all sat around the table last week, I think it was on Friday, and I think there was a dozen, if not more of them. And it was just an exercise in kissing his ass is all it was. Every one of them took the opportunity to praise him, to tell him how wonderful he was, how much they appreciate what he does. And he sat there and sucked it all in. And it was absolutely sickening to watch. I can't put it any other way, folks. I know a little bit about leadership, only because I've been around some great leaders in my lifetime, in particular in the military. And I know one thing when it comes to leadership is that you don't surround yourself with people who tell you what you want to hear. That is a sign of a weak leader. And poor policy is a derivative of that. And when somebody like Trump only allows himself to have yes men and yes people around him, sycophants is the term that comes to mind, that is a number one indicator that person is a poor leader. A good leader insists on having people around him or her that will disagree with them at times and present and have the opportunity and the freedom to express that point of view. Now, when all is said and done, when that opportunity is given and the opinion is expressed, the leader who wears the mantle can have the opportunity to say and should say, look, you've been heard, I disagree, or I agree, and move on. But to just simply surround yourself with these lackeys and the way in which they kissed his butt, it was absolutely disgusting to watch. It was actually sickening. And to me, that ain't leadership. That is poor leadership 101. You want to be a good leader, you get yourself surrounded by some people who are willing to tell you what you need to hear, what you should be hearing. And people who don't always agree with you. And don't punish them because they don't. Just my take, as I always say. Acadia researchers find Nova Scotia coyotes have elevated mercury levels. We'll talk to Bob Bancroft about this when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, I saw this story on the CBC website this morning. A new study of coyotes by Acadia University researchers to monitor mercury concentration in Nova Scotia's land-based wildlife has revealed elevated levels in predatory animals. A new research team from the University of Wolfville studied the livers of 101 coyotes provided by the Department of Natural Resources from around the province and found mercury levels higher than those recorded in most other land mammals in North America and Europe. I reached out to Bob Bancroft to talk about all this, who's a retired wildlife biologist. Bob, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate it.
Nice to be here.
All right. Any surprises, I guess, first off, from the findings here?
Actually, not too much. The basic thing here is, Todd, that the western part of Nova Scotia and Nova Scotia in general is sort of on the tailpipe of North American industry and subject to a lot of not only just acid precipitation from rain, but also from dry deposition too, and has been for many years. So the mercury levels, and there's a lot of leaching going on in the soils, and the soils in western Nova Scotia are actually poorly equipped to buffer them. There's not much to them anymore. most of the forests in Nova Scotia that are accessible by horse in the 1700s, and then now by machinery have been cut 5 times, and a lot of the elements that are important for growth of trees were taken away with the logs, if you will. So without getting too sensitive about here, this fits with what's going on with a number of other things. And it's not only just predators, it's also deer livers, for example, that can be elevated as well.
Okay, so canary in the coal mine types, what might we read into this? Anything that this indicates that we should be aware of, perhaps?
Well, I think first of all that it bears some concern, that's for sure. On the other hand, it's within levels that are basically okay. I guess if you were really worried, you wouldn't be eating a lot of coyote livers or deer livers. And I should say that other parts of Nova Scotia are better buffered. There's deeper soils, and the pH is better. But this situation's been exacerbated by a lot of things. I mean, for example, if you flood, when there was a lot of flooding going on because of some of the electricity production from hydro dams, there were elevated mercury levels as a result of the flooding. So what happens is the acidity leaches these things out, and then it gets in the food chain. And so it's actually in a lot of animals, not just. I mean, I really wouldn't call coyotes can be a top predator, but when I first started studying them back in the 1970s, I was finding scats or poop, as it's more commonly called, that had fawn hair and blueberries in it. So what the researchers have found is, in fact, there's a lot of variability. And I suspect some of the young coyotes were eating different things. In the course of some of the work I do, I discovered, for example, that foxes actually catch fish, so you wind up in a situation where the diet is so varied that there be variations by region in terms of what's availability. And of course, at different times of the year, there's different things to eat. But this fits a lot of the loons in western Nova Scotia have had some problems with mercury. And some of the fish do, and it does say it's a good comment on what we've done to the natural world, I guess.
Yeah, and of course, nothing happens in a vacuum in biodiversity. We all know how interconnected it is, and this is an example of that, obviously.
Yeah, and it's sort of ricocheting through the food chain, not just with coyotes.
Yeah. All right. So any outside of, I guess, just should the public be concerned about this in general, or just what are your thoughts on how impactful this really is?
Well, it's certainly a concern for biologists and people like myself, but I don't see much we can do. There is some hope, but it's kind of sad that, for example, there's less acid rain, if you what most people call it. It's actually precipitation, dry stuff too, as I said before. There's less of it coming down now, but it's interesting that much of western Nova Scotia hasn't recovered. And this is bad for the tree growth and everything else. In other words, if there's a given amount of organic nutrients in the upper layer of soil, there's more being washed away. If whatever's left there is still there's more being washed away than is being deposited. And I must say the forestry, when they focus on softwoods, those needles are acidic, whereas when you grow hardwoods, you've got something that is sweeter for the soil. So we're kind of bent in a direction here where I think we're going to run out of a lot of things in our forests just because of the combination of things that are happening.
Right, and the story talks about says they're walking garbage cans. Researchers found that coyotes collected from southwest Nova Scotia had higher levels of mercury than those from other areas of the province, which was consistent with findings in previous studies on birds, fish, and lichen. But Mallory said it's difficult to establish obvious patterns because coyotes are walking garbage cans and consume a variety of different things. What's your response to that?
I think that I think it's been taken a little bit out of context. They're essentially not really a totally top predator. They're opportunistic animals that will, as I said, eat deer fawns and then turn around and have blueberries. And it all varies by season. And but what I think what the gentleman's saying, and I don't pretend, my interpretation is that they'll eat almost anything.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, if you're looking for a direct link through the food chain, it's not there. And other species, for example, like lynx, would have a more restricted diet. They would be restricted to snowshoe hares, or rabbits as people call them, and they, of course, so there'd be a growth of material that the hare eats, and then there'd be the fact that the lynx would eat the hare, so it would be a pretty obvious food chain. There is no obvious food chain with coyotes, really, but that's a good thing in a way, and in the sense that they're very adaptable and able to do that, and but it doesn't lead. There's no big finger pointing to some particular element of the food chain that's causing this to happen. I think it's a general environmental condition that prevails, and we could all be growing more hardwood trees that are deeper rooted and can better withstand higher droughts and hurricanes, and be less chance of blowing down with deeper rooted trees. And we could make the habitat a little bit more resilient if we could, and that would sweeten the soils, and we really should give our forests a chance. They've been cut roughly 5 times in the last 300 years, and there's been too much taken away. And I think this is indirect evidence of the fact that acid rain and too much forest cutting has caused the soils to be very impoverished, and what they grow is affected in this way.
All right, so kind of the vibe or the takeaway that I get from you here is that you don't seem overly concerned with this.
Let's put it this way: I've habituated to the reality.
Yeah.
I don't like it,
Yeah.
but there in the study they said that the levels are tolerable, but I think we should be turning this situation around in the way I've just described to try to make the land more healthy. I think we'd have more healthy coyotes and everything else.
Yeah.
I kind of like coyotes, actually.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Bob, listen, appreciate your insight as always. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right, take care. Bob Bancroft, retired wildlife biologist. Folksy Philosophies of Ted Lasso comedy series at the heart of a Nova Scotia University course. That when we come back. A professor at Dalhousie University is offering a course using the philosophies of a fictional soccer coach, Ted Lasso, as a guide to, among other things, build honest relationships and learning to be curious about other people. Lori Dithurbide is an associate professor of kinesiology at Dalhousie University School of Health and Human Performance and joins me here in studio. Lori, thanks for doing this today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. I'm going to plead ignorance. I had no idea who Ted Lasso was. I came in off vacation today, the first day back, and I said to Vanessa, who the hell is Ted Lasso? So I'll ask you who that is.
Ted Lasso is a pretty popular character in an Apple TV television.
Well, that's why I don't know who he is.
And the premise of the show is Ted Lasso is played by Jason Sudeikis of Saturday Night Live fame. But the premise of the show is there's an owner of an English Premier League soccer team gets divorced. His ex-wife gets the team. Mm-hmm. And in the divorce, and she wants to pretty much demolish the team because it's the one thing he loves. So to do that, she hires a Division II NCAA American football coach to come and coach her English Premier League soccer team. And then, like I said, hilarity ensues.
And where does that leave Ted?
Ted is kind of like this kind, innocent character who kind of takes on with the Midwestern charm, who takes on the challenge along with his assistant coach, and admittedly knows very little about British football, which we'd call soccer.
Yeah. Okay. So what? Why is some of this transferable in real life? Because obviously it is.
Yeah, I think. And one of the reasons why the show is really popular, it's won quite a few awards, is it's very good comedy writing, but it also kind of addresses a lot of issues in real life, things like in sport, like they address like social justice issues, mental health in sport, different coaching approaches, and kind of has this comedic twist. But, if you describe the show, you can laugh, you can cry, and bridges some serious topics with a really kind of, I think, fun comedy lens.
Okay, so how does that translate into curriculum?
Yeah, that's a good question. So our learning outcomes, this is a fourth year, 4,000 level undergraduate course, so mostly for third and fourth year students. And with the learning objectives, really looking at kind of the philosophy and theories of coaching and leadership, looking at social justice issues in sport, but also asking the students to really kind of dive into their critical thinking skills as well.
Okay, so when it comes to employing that or making that happen, how do you use the show, I guess, as a backdrop?
Yeah. So, I'm thinking of like the show is kind of like our textbook. So students will be kind of on their own watching some episodes, and then we're going to be coming to the classroom and discussing some of the topics. So, based in academic literature and in theories and whatnot. So looking at using as the show and scenes in the show as, I don't want to say real life examples because they're not real life, it's a TV show, but as examples of how to interpret coaching philosophies and coaching theories that we have in the academic literature, but having kind of an example that's a little bit more, say, intriguing or maybe a little bit more attractive than a textbook.
Is this for everybody?
We are opening it up to all undergrad students across Dal. So it's in the kinesiology program, but it's an open course.
I guess what I'm getting at, does it resonate with everybody?
I think so. I think that's one of the charms of the show. It's really kind of, it's very popular, and the topics that that are brought up, why it's in the context of sport in the show, but things like women in leadership, leadership styles, it's kind of transferable to all areas of work. I've got students from marine biology to chemistry to management who have already enrolled in the course. So I think that's going to be really cool.
Are there any licensing issues with it or anything like that? Or
no? So the copyright, of course, before doing anything, I definitely consulted with our Dal legal department and copyright office. So because the students are going to watch on their own and their own kind of accounts, we're not going to be showing any kind of episodes or anything in class. So yeah, that's pretty. That kind of takes care of all that copyright stuff.
Okay, so what's the end game here? What's the mission statement for this?
Yeah, well, the learning outcomes, what we want the students to get out of this class, because it's an upper year level class, is, like I said, like really looking into their critical thinking skills, their self-awareness. A lot of the assignments are going to be focused on kind of thinking about how this content relates to their real life. The kind of the content will be focused around the leadership, the coaching, some sports psychology, some sports sociology, and some social justice issues.
What are some Ted Lasso-isms out there, if that's a way of putting it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the ones I use quite a bit is "Be curious, not judgmental," which is one of his quotes from his scenes. And I think that kind of sums up a lot of his character, and a lot of the message of the show is people have different layers to each other. So if we kind of just try not to be judgmental, but try to be curious about different things and different people, you can better understand them.
Yeah, softening sports in particular at the higher levels is something that I think we need a better conversation on. Right? We've had hazings and all of these kind of pretty ugly backgrounds of sports in particular. And I think anybody who has gone through that could attest to it. So trying to address some of those issues, I think, is at play here, is it?
Yeah, and one of Ted's philosophies in the show is like it's about, even at the English Premier League context, so the super high performance and a super say scrutinized sport in that country, is developing humans and not just athletes. So it's he says it multiple times, it's not about wins or losses, it's about developing the human, and that kind of comes into the conversation in the episodes.
Yeah, so kinesiology, so you're in the business of creating educators, right?
Kinesiology, exercise science, human movement. My area is more kind of sports psychology and performance psychology.
Right,
yeah.
right. But in term, that's education, right?
Yeah.
All right. So by doing that, I guess this is, for decades we had kind of the same approach to athletics of all the depending on how which level of competition you're talking here. But how difficult is it to invoke change?
Well, that's such a good question, and if I had a straight answer, I'd probably there'd be a lot more change happening. But it's I think it takes leaders to kind of set the tone and set a culture, and then it takes followers to buy into that leader. And sometimes it just takes time and kind of some turnover. I use there was times where seatbelts where people protested against seatbelts, and it takes some time to kind of for things to become normalized in a different way. So I think with some patience, some effort, some persistence, and some good leadership, we can elicit some change.
Do you have some people poo-pooing this, perhaps, and thinking this is not very serious, more kind of a highbrow attitude? Not yet. Maybe
not
now.
Yet. No, not yet. I think from a student's perspective, when I was developing the course and kind of I'm going to say pilot testing the idea for students, those who'd watched the show and those who hadn't watched the show, they're like, oh, that sounds really cool. And, I think that would be a really good way to kind of learn. And, I've had students who've watched the show who are like, I think it'd be really good forum or example to kind of really get into some deep discussion. So I haven't come across that just yet.
Okay, here's an email. It says, be curious, not judgmental, was a Walt Whitman quote, not Ted Lasso. Ted makes use of it with citation to Whitman.
Yeah, so he says that in the show, but he's quoting Walt Whitman in the show. Yeah,
there you go. Well, it's good to know that people are listening.
Absolutely.
So what's the response been like?
Pretty good. So we opened it up into registration a couple weeks ago, and it's open so far right to 200 people, and we're just about full. We're about 3/4 of way full, and students are in exams right now. So I'm anticipating before we get started on the semester that it'll be a full class.
Okay, Lori, very interesting. Thanks for coming in. I now know more about it, and I'll check out Ted Lasso.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks so much for coming in. I appreciate it. Lori Dithurbide, Associate Professor of Kinesiology at Dalhousie University School of Health and Human Performance. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it very much. I'd like to thank Vanessa Vandeness as well on the other side of the glass. The control board's doing a fine job as always. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.